Oh, okay. We're learning the Dvar Malchut, but I'd like to tell an interesting story. Excuse me. Someone just asked a good question, and the question is if I go out and I put the tefillin on people or do another commandment, can I tell who is Jewish or not? So the answer is no, I can't tell who is Jewish. And I even tell a joke, which, I mean, it unfortunately is the truth. And the joke is that I've been going on and putting on tefillin on people in the streets for like 40 years. 40 years I've been going out and asking people. So I have certain senses. I've developed certain senses and psychic abilities that I can look at a person and I can immediately tell in Israel if the person is going to put on tefillin or not. I know I have a feeling, I have a sense, I can tell if a person is going to put on tefillin or not. 98% of the time I'm wrong. I have the senses, I have the feelings, but I'm wrong. So I've learned not to trust my senses. And the fact of the matter is many more people put on tefillin than I would possibly imagine do it. And that's not the story I wanted to tell you. That just popped up in my mind. The story I wanted to tell you is, this was, I don't know, 7 years ago, 8 years ago. I was in New York by the Lubavitcher Rebbe for the holidays, the holiday of Sukkot. In the holiday of Sukkot, there's a commandment which is called Lulav and Etrog. The Lulav is like this tall middle branch of a palm tree. And you take this fruit and you put it together, and there's two other types of vegetation, you tie them all together. Anyway, so I stood in New York. I went in New York. I went alone. I looked for somebody to go with me, but everybody had partners. So I went alone. And I stood, I think, in Washington Plaza or someplace. I don't even remember where the place was, but there were people that were walking by. It was a nice sort of a garden. People were sitting above. And then you just came down to the street. So I just stood there and I asked people, anybody that looked vaguely Jewish, I asked them if they were Jewish. So people were like, Black, Chinese. So I didn't ask them, but anybody that did, they're like Hispanic people. I don't know. I couldn't tell if they were Jewish or not. I asked a lot of Arabs. A couple of people even got mad at me. I have stories about that also. Anyway, so I was asking people if they're Jewish. So I said, excuse me, sir, are you Jewish? Excuse me, sir, are you Jewish? Okay, there was this. So, once in a while a person would say yes, and there was a young couple, a Jewish young couple, nice looking people. They had a baby carriage and they were dressed well. It was the holiday. This is intermediate days. The holiday is 7 days long. So there's there's the first day is a holiday and the last day is a holiday. It's really 8 days. Okay. Anyway, so there's in the middle, there's 5 days that are called intermediate days, and you can drive and you can do anything, but it's still a holiday. So there were two very attractive, young people, Americans, maybe in their early 20s, and they had a baby carriage. They were dressed very well, and the man was clean shaven. They put on cream, whatever. They then take off the beard. That's some Jews do that, even religious Jews, and they do it. It's really not exactly right to do, but it's permissible according to certain ways. Anyway, so they were standing behind me. So I saw they came closer and closer to where I was asking people to do Lulav and Etrog. They came closer and closer to me. And finally, they were right behind me. I said, hello, happy holiday. And then I just kept going on and asked. So the man, he came over to me and he said, excuse me, can I ask you a question? So I said, yeah, but I'm asking people if they want to put. He said, just a small question. How do you know who's Jewish? How do you know who's Jewish?
How do you know?
So I said, I don't know. I have no idea who's Jewish. He said, what? You don't know who's Jewish? I said, no, what's so amazing about that? He said, well, everybody that you ask if they're Jewish, I said, that's why I ask people if they're Jewish. He didn't know what I was saying to them. I was saying, are you? He said, well, I said, I'm asking people, are you Jewish? He said, well, that's amazing. He went back and he told his wife, and she came over and said, I said, what's so amazing about that? He said, everybody that you ask smiles. Everyone that you ask has a big smile. And after you ask them, they have a big smile on their face. You figure you ask somebody, are you Jewish? They say, hey, you dirty Jews. I hate the Jews. No, everybody, or they just have a regular look on their face. And they go, but everybody that I asked had a smile. They smiled. No, I mean, I didn't notice it at all. Afterwards, I noticed. What's the point of the whole thing? The point I want to say is that people sense that somehow or other that the commandments are a good thing. But you have to do it in sort of a crazy way. If you're just in your synagogue, say you're religious, I'm religious, but I'm standing out on the street, I'm asking people if they're Jewish to do a good thing, and everybody's happy. And sure enough, this year I was also there, and I saw that it's really true. That I have not seen one person with a sour face if you ask them to do a commandment, because the commandments in the end come from the Creator, and the Creator is creating everybody. And even if nobody understands that, including me, but deep down, everybody feels somehow or other that it's true. Okay, let's go. And now we're going on. The Rebbe Eliezer ben Azariah, the day that he was chosen to be the king. Let me just do this. I want to just mute a few people of the mute is here. There we go. Okay. So I muted everybody just so that there's no this, and I'll finish, and afterwards I'll unmute everyone and people can ask questions. And Rebbe Eliezer, so it says, the day that Rebbe Eliezer ben Azariah became the head of the Sanhedrin, he became the Nasi, which basically means the leader of the Jewish people. So that day, the most important thing that he had was, I want that people should say the third paragraph of Shema, which talks about tzitzit, but it also talks about going out of Egypt. That people should say that also at night. And the rabbi said, let's say it also in the days of the Moshiach. And he agreed. That was the law. You say it in the nighttime, you'll say it in the days of the Moshiach. So the Rebbe asked the obvious question, okay, nighttime, we can say that's a metaphor for now in the time of exile, that we have to talk about going out of Egypt, because we have to go out of Egypt. But why do we have to say it in the days of the Moshiach? Why? So he says, because in the days of the Mashiach, we'll also have to have this movement, this, attitude of going out, going higher, leaving even boundaries of holiness to get to a higher level of holiness, because God is infinite. And, says the Rebbe, in addition to that, that means to go out even into the whole world, that the whole world should be aware of the Creator. That even in the days of the Mashiach, we should not be satisfied with the fact that the Jewish people all realize that God is the king, and that he gave the commandments, and all the Jewish people will do the commandments. There's a holy temple. All the Jews are in Israel, and the world, there's no more wars. That's not enough. We have to make sure that the non-Jews also realize of the greatness of God. That's called going out of Egypt. Okay, now we can add on that that's the whole idea. There's a story about Rebbe Eliezer ben Azariah. That there's a story that's told in the Gemara, a story that's told in the Talmud. That on that day, the Rebbe Eliezer ben Azariah became the leader as the evicted Rebbe Shimon ben Gamliel. Rebbe Shimon ben Gamliel, Shimon ben Gamliel, he was the head. And he did things that they considered to be were too severe. And he was too strict with everybody. So he embarrassed other rabbis, which was in a way his job, because he had to cement his rulership, right? That it was make it firm, and so therefore he was very, very strict. But he was too strict. He went overboard. So they evicted him, and they put Rebbe Eliezer ben Azariah in his place. It says on that day, Salku Shomri Petach, that they removed the guards from the doors of the place of learning, and gave any pupil that wanted to come in, they gave him permission to come in. Rabbi Gamliel used to say that any pupil that is not totally refined his personality, that his inside was not like his outside, he couldn't come into the Beit HaMidrash. On that day, they added 250, something like that, chairs. By Rabbi Gamliel, he was something like in the future. What's it going to be in the future? In the future, everything is going to be very exact and pure. That's what Rebbe Gamliel said. I'm only going to let pupils that are pure and that have no egotism, false egotism, come into the learn Torah. Anyone that's a little bit egotistical, that's selfish, out. I don't want him in here. No, that's the way it's going to be in the future. In the future, days of the Moshiach, there's not going to be any false egotism. There won't be any more selfishness. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, he wanted to simulate what is going to be in the future, perfect world. That Ruach HaTumah, that the spirit of impurity, I'll take away from the world. There should not come into the Beit HaMidrash, the place of, I don't want anything like that in my place of learning. A pupil that's inside is not like his outside, because the holiness that's going to be in the future, in Makom, there's no place at all for the opposite of good. Some people say that that's why Adam ate from the tree, because he couldn't stand the bad in the world. God said, don't eat from the tree. He couldn't stand that there was this potential of evil, and he made a mistake. He wasn't supposed to eat from it. He should have held off. It says that if he would have held off just for a few hours, 3 hours, whatever, until Shabbat, then he would have been able to eat from the tree. But he couldn't. He wanted to immediately. Anyway, that's one opinion. Okay, like something like Hillel and Shammai. Shammai was like a sum or chotav, means like measuring. Everything is measured exact. Therefore, the law in the future, it says, will be like Beit Shammai, which is not the case Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. So Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel was very, very strict, which is not the case Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah he was more practical in this world, something like Hillel. And even in the world, the Olam, the Meitzarim, the Gebulas, even this world that is all limited and bounded, and we don't see godliness. Everything is concealed and hidden. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah said, I'm not going to be like Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, he didn't want to have anything to do with the physical world and the exile the way it is now. In his Beit HaMidrash is going to be the Holy of Holies. Only the special holy people can come in. Said Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, my place of learning is not going to be like that. I'm going to let even the physical world in. The matzav shechoshech v'galut, bo'ef sharut, nimtza ein tochu gabaro. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah said, I'm going to let anyone in who wants to fix himself up, even though he's not fixed up. That's like it is in the exile. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah said, I want to help anyone that wants to be pure, even though he's totally not pure now. I'm giving the opportunity to purify and elevate, even going out. That means going out of Egypt. That's why Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah was so important that he said we should include in our Shema Yisrael this third paragraph about going out of Egypt, even in the nighttime. You're supposed to say Shema Yisrael in the day and in the night, even in the nighttime, even in the time of exile. Therefore, in that day, it said he took away the guards on the door and he gave everyone permission to come in. And that's a real idea of a Nasi, a leader, that he wants to increase pupils in Israel. And you should know the same thing was said about the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe and Lubavitcher Rebbe. What are you making? You're cheapening the Torah. That was the whole story also with the Baal Shem Tov, with the Maggid of Mezrich, when they saw a piece of Chassidut on the floating around in the gutter. And the first Rebbe of Chabad, he said it's like the king's son was very sick and he had to crush up a diamond and a lot of it spilled out of his mouth. And finally, a little bit went into the king's, the whole story. And it saved the king's son's life, but a lot of the diamond was lost. That was the same thing with the Rebbes of Chabad. And they took it also from Rebbe Elazar ben Azariah, that everyone could come in to learn Torah. You could think that since the Rebbe Elazar ben Azariah, he let every pupil come in, even pupils that were not 100% or maybe not even 50%, and maybe not even 75%, not even 25% fixed up. Pupils that only externally looked good, but inside, it's Efshar, you might think that by means of this. So the redemption is not going to be a complete one. Huh? This is something like Reform Judaism. What's going on? You're lowering the standards. You can't lower the standards in Judaism. What is Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah doing? Maybe the standards of the future redemption will be much lower. That namely, that bad won't be transformed to good. The bad will exist, but we'll just sort of, we'll oppose it. Shekei, and therefore, Geula Shlema Talui, because I take back what I said about Reform Jews, because they don't believe in any sort of redemption at all. They think that everything is okay. But you might think that if Rebbe Elazar ben Azariah allowed everyone to come in, that would mean that he was setting the standards so low that was the goal, to have low standards. That's okay. Maybe that's if so, that says and therefore there won't be a complete redemption, because the future redemption depends on this, that everything, the inside of everything will be like the outside. There won't be any hidden bad in the world. There won't be any bad at all. It says the spirit of impurity I'll take away from the world. That's what it says. That's what the rabbi, then that's why steps in the Chachamim. And the Chachamim said, all the days of your life, including the nights and also the days of the Moshiach. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah is saying that I am allowing everyone to come in. True, I'm lowering the standards, and true, that means that the Mashiach will come and the world won't be totally purified according to the way I'm doing things. And that's why I'm saying that even in the days of the Mashiach, you should talk about going out of Egypt. Shagam b'matzav galus, when there is ein tochu kabaro, nevertheless we can bring, even here, we can bring the total redemption. Also, Reverend Gamliel, he did not refrain from going to the Beit HaMidrash after all the doors were opened up. Shedargas avodas o kashura im yamot Mashiach, that the whole thing of Reverend Gamliel would also be attached, connected to this new definition of the future redemption that Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah brought. Namely what? That the future redemption could be relevant even to people who weren't pure. And the future redemption can come even when there are people that aren't pure, because the redemption itself will purify them. Rebbe Gamliel agreed, and he even helped to Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, that he let everyone to come in and made the future redemption available to everybody in the world. That's the idea of Chassidut Chabad, right? To come out, and these ideas are spread out to everyone in the world. Okay, now we can connect this to the Mishnah, which is at the end of the first chapter of the tractate Brachot, which is the last Mishnah. The first chapter of Brachot has, I think, 10 Mishnahs in it, and the last Mishnah there says like this: Me'ematai, when korim et Shema ba'arvit. When do we say Shema in the evening? Like I told you, it's a commandment in the Torah to say these 6 words. Some people say the whole paragraph. In any case, it's a commandment to say Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Twice a day. Say those words twice a day. Mostly people don't just say that one line, they say more. You say a whole paragraph and 2 paragraphs. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah said we should say 3 paragraphs. You have to say it in the morning and in the evening, but there's limitations. There's I'd say a definition of time and place. You're not allowed to say Shema in every place you want, a dirty place, etc. You're not allowed to say this the Shema at any time. There's a commandment in the day and in the night. When? The whole day, the whole night? No. It says it has to be only in the first few hours of the daytime, and the nighttime is when the sun sets. Can't say it before that. When is it? Can you say the Shema prayer in the evening? Okay, that's what it says. The simple meaning is that Shema Yisrael, the saying of Shema Yisrael, is not just to make your lips and your mouth utter these vowels and consonants and these words, but really saying Shema means that you're accepting on yourself the yoke of heaven in a way of me'emotai. Emotai means when, that's an Aramaic word, but it also means, ema means fear in Hebrew. Ema, lashon fear. When should you say it even ba'arvis, even in the nighttime? When is the darkness of exile? That's the whole end of the first chapter of Brachot, that you remember going out of Egypt in the nighttime. And Shema, that going out of Egypt is the same thing as Kriyat Shema. The Tanya also explains this also. What is it in chapter 47? Look, and therefore, Tiknu Parshat Yetziat Mitzrayim, B'shat Kriyat Shema. Therefore, we talk about going out of Egypt, the 3rd chapter of Shema. We say that in there it says, I am God that took you out of Egypt. That's tacked on to Shema Yisrael, even though it's not part of the commandment of Shema Yisrael. Shema Yisrael is just saying the first 6 words, right, or the first paragraph, but the rabbis insisted that in the daytime, you should say the 3rd chapter, the 3rd paragraph of Shema, which talks about going out of Egypt. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah said you should say it not only in the daytime, but also in the nighttime. The rabbis will say you should even do it in the days of the Moshiach. Okay, but that's the idea of Shema. What's Shema? Shema is accepting on yourself the yoke of heaven. Al pi haklal, according to what we said before, that notes techilas u'masofam, that the end can only be found in the beginning, and the beginning can be found in the end. So therefore, there's connection to the end. This is the beginning of the Talmud. Here's the end of the Talmud. And the Gemara. What does it say in the end of the Talmud? It says, anyone who learns laws every day is promised that he's going to be Olam Haba, that he's going to go to the world to come. World to come usually means the raising of the dead. Shene'amar, like it says, Halichos Olam Lo, Al Tikra Halichos El Halachos. Don't say that there's a sense in the prophets that says Halichot Olam Lo. It's in Habakkuk, in the prophet Habakkuk. Don't say Halichot Olam Lo, but say Halachot Olam Lo. Halachot, Halichot Olam is the going of the world. This draws down what's called the laws of the Torah. The laws of the Torah, what creates the world. Ad Ladarga Olam Haba, and even the upper, the world to come, the raising of the dead. That's like the completion, including the world to come means the raising of the dead, which is going to come. It all depends on us learning laws. That's the Mishnayos. It says, Lo Motza Kodesh Baruch Hu Kli Machzik Bracha, that God did not find a vessel to hold his blessing except peace. Like it says, Hashem Oz Lo Moitem, Hashem Yivrech Asamo V'Shalom. God gives his people power. He gives them peace. Only when there's peace between the Jews. That's the end of the Gemara Brachot itself. Okay, so what do we have? We have the beginning of the Mishnah is Brachot. The end of the first chapter of Brachot is talking about saying Shema in the nighttime. The end of the whole tractate Brachot is talking about peace. The end of the whole entire 6 orders of the Mishnah, how does that end? It ends with learning Torah that brings peace to the world. That God gave the Jewish people power. Who is power? Like Eliezer ben Azariah. El, God, helps the Jewish people. And Oz is Torah. Oz lamoitem. Until Hashem blesses the Jewish people with peace. That the ultimate level of peace in the world is going to be the future redemption. So that's what I mean. So that's the whole idea of Rebbe Eliezer ben Azariah. Rebbe Eliezer ben Azariah, he said, God is helping us. Therefore, I say that let's take in all the pupils, anyone who wants to learn. And that's what's going to bring to the Moshiach. Moshiach will bring true peace to the world because everyone will be learning Torah. The Torah brings peace to the world. And in addition to that, even in the time when Moshiach comes, we'll still be going out of Egypt. There'll still be elevations higher and higher. And we'll, not only that, it'll go from the Jewish people out into the whole rest of the world. If so, according to this, we can understand the questions we asked in the beginning. If you remember, it says these are the names of the Jewish people that came into Egypt. That the names of the Jewish people is connected to the future redemption. Every name is connected to the redemption. Even though that's simple, I mean, we're talking about the people going into Egypt. Haboy Mitzrayim, like we say in the Haftorah, like we just learned in Torah or. Haboy Mitzrayim is talking about the Jews coming into Egypt. But most of the commentators say this is also referring to Haboy Mitzrayim is talking about, Haboy Mitzrayim, this is talking about going into Egypt. I'm talking about a Yashresh, the what we learned in the morning, previously. This is talking about going, what we said, when you go into Egypt, this is the source from the future redemption, to the future redemption. That we mention going out of Egypt, even in the nighttime, the time that we're in exile. This is the whole idea of going into Egypt. The whole reason that we went into the darkness of the exile was in order for the future redemption. And like we just finished learning in the Mimer, that just like in Egypt, they suffered for 210 years, and they got out, received the Torah, the revealed Torah. Well, now we've been suffering already for 2,000 years, so we're going to receive what's called the inside of the Torah. Not just the outside of the Torah, but the secrets of the Torah as well. And that will bring to the days of the Mashiach. That's the true idea of going out of Egypt. Like we said before. Therefore, the Jewish people, when they went into Egypt, it says they had names which indicated the going out of Egypt. Ki HaKavana, the whole reason why the Jewish people went into Egypt and why we're in this exile now, and Egypt means limitations and boundaries and concealment, is order that the Jewish people, Yifalu, that we will bring about and we will reveal how that this is only in order to bring the future redemption. And not only that to bring the future redemption, but that going into the exile itself was a form of redemption. Namely, what that will take the whole physical world and elevate the whole thing, that everyone will see the reason why God is creating it. And we can add, that's what it means that Jewish people went into Egypt. There were 70 souls. How many people went into Egypt? It said there were only 70 Jews that went in. We can say that this is also hinted at the idea of going into Egypt in exile between the 70 nations that we are in now. Like it says, Keneged Shivim Nefesh, that corresponds to 7 nations, that corresponds to the 70 souls that went into Egypt. By means of that, we can reveal the redemption of the Jewish people. The 70 souls that went into Egypt, that hints at the 70 nations that we're among now. How exactly the 70 comes out? I mean, there's more than that in the United Nations, but there's a way to figure it out. This, how can the 70 nations, in other words, all the population of the whole entire world, how can they become purified? By means of the 70 souls that came out of Jacob. Like Rebbe Elazar ben Azariah. He was 70 years old. This number 70 gives the power that we can mention going out of Egypt, even in the nighttime, even in the exile, in order to bring to the days of the Moshiach. Namely, that we have the power from this ayin, from the 70, the big ayin, letter ayin, which is in Kriya Shema. If you look in the Torah, you'll see it says Shema Yisrael. It's a sentence in the Torah. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Shema, the word Shema is written with a big ayin. That refers to the 70 nations that we're among, that we can purify. That refers to the 70 souls that went down into Egypt. That refers to the 70 years of Rebbe Elazar ben Azariah. It refers to also the 7 emotions of God, times 10, each one times 10, that gives us the power to do this. From this, we can understand also to the Jewish people that they should know that even when they are in exile, in addition to the fact that the Jewish people still exist and they are complete and they have been, right, their integrity and their identity is not changed. Like it's also in the end of the parsha where it says Vayechi, last week, the end of last week parsha. It says that they embalmed Yosef and kept him in Egypt. Why did they embalm him? In order that his body should be whole. These are the names of the Jewish people that came into Egypt. This adds even more. It says that when Yosef died, he didn't ask them to take him out of Egypt like Yaakov did. He remained in Egypt in order to protect the Jews there. And in order that when they would come, the Jews that were there, and even more, Al Shem Geula, that the Jews that went into Egypt, right, they took Yosef there with them into Egypt. They took Yosef there with them. Right, Yosef was there the whole time with them, and Yosef was buried there. I'm sorry, when they left Egypt, they took Yosef with them, but the whole time Yosef was there protecting them. That the Jewish people remained whole in their souls and their bodies, in their physical life, in their spiritual life together. And so it is now. A healthy body and a healthy soul, and the ultimate completion. That's what's going to be in the future redemption. And that's going to be in even more Ge'ulas Yisrael, a total redemption of the Jewish people, that even then, Kol Yamei Chayecha, that now all the days of our life are going to be revealed, that they were what actually brought to the days of the Mashiach. And even in the days of the Mashiach, we'll also have to mention going out of Egypt, the power that took us out and that's continuing to make us elevate even higher and higher, so that the whole world, so it all depends on us. That's what the Rebbe is saying. It all depends on us to bring this amazing, miraculous future redemption that's supposed to happen any second. And we're given power to do so by God, but especially through Rebbe Elazar ben Azariah, namely the Nasi, the leader of every generation, which is the Chabad Rebbes of every generation. As we'll continue, God willing, tomorrow. Today is Thursday. Tomorrow, God willing, we will finish this. Tomorrow we'll finish this. We'll have a class at 8:15. Today also there'll be a class at 3 o'clock. But let's do the Yom Yom. Chabad Hasidim have a tradition made by the Alter Rebbe that every day we study a parsha of the Chumash. Of that we studied with Rashi. This was done by all the Rebbes, and we also do it. We also add on a few other commentaries, but we learn also with Rashi. Hope to see you all at 3 o'clock. God bless you. Have a good day with Moshiach now. I'm sorry, I muted everybody. One second. Maybe people have questions here. 1 minute. 1 minute. How did this go over here?